In 1976, a young Japanese doctor arrived in Okinawa expecting to find patients. He came with forms, he came with training. He came ready to document the illnesses that usually follow old age. Instead, he found something far more unsettling. He found older people who did not look like the version of aging most of the modern world has accepted as normal. Men and women in their 80s, 90s and beyond, that still moved with less drag, less heaviness, less visible metabolic decline than you would expect. Not perfect bodies, not fantasy, but not the same kind of aging most people over 50 are bracing for. And over the years, one thing kept showing up, again and again. Not one miracle food. A small group of everyday foods. Simple foods. Foods modern people often overlook because they look too ordinary to matter. Sweet potatoes, bitter melon, tofu, sea vegetables, turmeric, miso, and meals that ended earlier than ours do. That last one matters more than it sounds. Because the doctor did not just find different ingredients. He found a different relationship with eating. And after 45, that difference may matter more than almost anything you can buy. Because by then, your body starts telling the truth. It tells you when breakfast does not hold you. It tells you when your energy collapses in the afternoon. It tells you when you feel heavy after dinner, restless at night, puffy in the morning, and hungry in ways that do not feel clean. Most people assume the answer is stricter dieting. Okinawa suggests something else. That many people are not just eating the wrong foods. They are eating inside a broken rhythm. And there are 3 parts to that pattern you can still recover. The first is the food they built the day around. The second is the taste modern life trained you to avoid. And the third is the part that made those foods work differently inside the body. That last piece is where most people fail. Not because it is complicated, because it sounds too simple to deserve that much power. Picture Okinawa before convenience food took over the rhythm of the day. Morning light enters a small kitchen. There is no performance here, no branded powders, no healthy packaging, no one chasing protein numbers before sunrise. Just a table, a knife, a stove, a tray of cooked sweet potatoes from the night before, a bowl of miso warming gently, tofu cut into cubes, sea vegetables soaking, a bitter melon split open on a wooden board, turmeric staining fingertips gold. This is where most people misunderstand blue zones. They think longevity starts with nutrients. But in places like Okinawa, food arrived inside a pattern. It came from gardens, markets, small kitchens, walking distance sunlight repetition, and modest portions. Food was not constantly engineered to be irresistible. It was designed by culture to be livable. And that changes the body. Not just because of vitamins or antioxidants. Because the body experiences food differently when meals are slower, simpler, and less aggressive. That is what the doctor kept seeing. The same foods, yes, but also the same rhythm around them. The first food that kept showing up was the humble sweet potato. Not as a side dish, as a foundation. A lot of modern adults have built breakfast on foods that barely behave like food anymore. Toast, sugary cereal, granola that is really dessert with branding, a protein bar eaten in traffic, coffee replacing an actual meal. Then they wonder why they are hungry again by 10:30, why they want something sweet by mid-afternoon, why dinner feels impossible to control. That is not bad character. That is unstable input creating unstable appetite. The Okinawan pattern started differently. A real starch, a substantial one, something earthy, fibrous, quiet, and slow enough not to whip the body around in the first few hours of the day. That is why the sweet potato mattered. Not because it was exotic, because it gave the body a steadier opening. And then came the second food modern life almost trained out of us. Goya, bitter melon, a taste so many people now reject on contact. But that bitterness is not a flaw in the system. It is part of the system. Modern food teaches your tongue to expect soft, sweet, rewarding, effortless pleasure. The more you live in that world, the harder it becomes to feel satisfied by real food. Bitterness interrupts that. It sharpens the meal. It gives the palate contour. It brings back an edge that industrial food almost erased. And in Okinawa, bitter melon was not sold as a capsule. It was cooked, salted, rinsed, stir-fried, eaten with tofu egg and other humble foods. That matters. Because modern people keep trying to extract the active ingredient and skip the living pattern around it. They want the compound without the kitchen, the benefit without the meal, the shortcut without the rhythm. But once you remove the food from its context, something important disappears. The chewing disappears. The slowing down disappears. The stopping point disappears. The way the body receives the meal changes. That is why this story is more useful than a list of superfoods. Because the food mattered, but the body advantage came from more than the food. And this is where the story starts becoming personal. Now, come back to your own day. Not to judge it, to see it clearly. Modern life has not just changed what people eat. It has changed the conditions under which the body recognizes hunger, satisfaction, and enough. We eat while scrolling. We eat while working. We eat while stressed. We eat too quickly to hear the body update us. We snack often enough that true hunger almost never gets a clean signal. We call it convenience, but biologically, it is confusion. And by the time many adults reach their late 40s, 50s, and 60s, they can feel the cost. Not always as disease first, as friction, too much appetite, too little stability, too much heaviness after meals, too little calm between them. This is why so many people feel like their body has become harder to manage with age. In many cases, the body is not becoming irrational. It is reacting to a pattern that keeps breaking its timing, flattening its signals, and pushing it past enough over and over again. That is the first twist. The problem may not be that your body is failing early. The problem may be that your body is responding normally to an eating environment that keeps it in a state of low-grade instability. And that is why healthy eating still fails so many people. Because they switch the ingredients but keep the same broken structure. They buy better bread, better cereal, better bars, better supplements. But the meal is still rushed, still screen-filled, still too fast, still too large, still shaped by stress instead of appetite. And that means the body never gets the clean signal it is looking for. Which brings us to the third thing the doctor kept seeing. And this is the one most people would rather ignore, because it does not flatter modern appetite. If you wanted to translate Okinawa into modern life, you would not start with perfection. You would start with recovery. 3 signals, 3 pieces. The first is the easiest to begin. Start the day with a real anchor. For 1 week, replace your usual fast breakfast starch with something substantial and quiet. A medium sweet potato is ideal. Purple, if you can find it. Orange, if that is what you have. Bake a few ahead of time. Keep them ready. Eat one with something that rounds out the meal without turning it into a feast. Eggs, tofu, plain yogurt, a little olive oil, a handful of nuts. The most common mistake is adding the sweet potato to the breakfast that is already failing you. That misses the point. The swap is the practice. The point is not add a healthy food. The point is, stop opening the day with food that disappears so fast it turns the rest of the day into appetite management. The second signal is the amplifier. Bring bitterness back into the week. If you can find bitter melon, use it once or twice a week. Salt it lightly, rinse it. Cook it with tofu egg onion or whatever simple combination you can sustain. If you cannot find it, do not freeze. Use arugula, endive, radicchio, mustard greens, watercress, kimchi, miso soup, a bitter salad before lunch. What matters is not cultural purity. What matters is retraining a palate that has been flattened by sweet, soft, hyper-palatable food. Most adults do not realize how much modern eating has trained them away from honest taste. And once that happens, satisfaction becomes harder to reach without overeating. The third signal is the one modern life took from people most quietly. Stop before the meal turns against you. This is where Okinawa stops being a food story and becomes a body story. People know the phrase, hara hachibu, but most do not live it. Because most modern meals do not end when hunger softens. They end when the plate is empty, when the restaurant portion is gone, when the show ends, when the emotional momentum burns out, when the body is already over the line. So here is the rule. When you feel the first clean drop in hunger, slow down. Put the fork down. Wait 2 minutes. Not because delay is magical, because your body is often slightly behind the pace of the meal. That pause is where many people rediscover something they have not felt in years. The difference between satisfied and full. And that difference changes everything. Because once you can feel it again, the body stops becoming a storage site for every meal. If you are busy, keep this simple. Prep sweet potatoes twice a week. Keep miso, tofu, eggs, greens, and one reliable starch in the house. Use one bitter or fermented touch most days. Create one pause before the second half of the meal. That is enough. You do not need a mountain village. You need a better pattern in your own kitchen. And here is the second twist. Okinawa's advantage was not that they discovered healthier food than the rest of the world. It was that they never normalized the level of fullness modern people now call a normal meal. That is the part most viewers do not want to hear, because it means the real divide was not just healthy food versus unhealthy food. It was whether the meal ended before the body became a storage problem. That is a much harder truth, and a more useful one, because many people are now eating good foods in quantities, speeds, and conditions that still make the body feel burdened. They are not failing because they did not buy the right superfood. They are failing because modern life taught them to lose the signal for enough. That is why the food alone is not the whole answer. The sweet potato matters. The bitter foods matter. The miso, tofu, sea vegetables, turmeric, all of that matters. But the real advantage appears when those foods are eaten inside a rhythm that does not push the body into excess. That is what the doctor kept seeing. Again and again. Not only specific foods, a meal pattern that protected the body from the kind of constant overload modern people now call normal. And once you see that the story changes, it is no longer a story about copying someone else's menu. It becomes a story about recovering a lost capacity in your own body. The capacity to eat, feel nourished, and stop before the meal turns heavy. That is rarer now than people think. And after 45, it may be one of the most valuable things to recover. So do not try to become Okinawan overnight. Test the pattern. For the next 7 days, replace your usual breakfast starch with a real one. Bring one bitter or fermented edge back into your week. And at every main meal, stop at the first clean moment when hunger softens. That is the experiment. Do not look for a miracle by tomorrow. Look for signals. In 3 days, many people notice something small but real. The morning feels less jagged. The urge to snack hits with less force. The crash before lunch gets smaller. In 7 days, the difference often becomes easier to feel. The stomach feels lighter. The afternoon feels less foggy. Dinner feels less chaotic. You start noticing when you are satisfied instead of only noticing when you are overfull. And in 30 days, if the pattern holds, the deeper shift is not usually dramatic. It is cleaner than that. Less friction, less bargaining with cravings, less heaviness after meals, more stability, more control without constant self-control. Not because you forced the body harder, because you finally started giving it clearer signals. So here is the real question. What has modern life taken from you the most? A real breakfast, a taste for real food, or the ability to stop before full? Tell me in the comments, because that is where the next video should start.